All right, class, this is now going to be getting into the study of world geography. As we mentioned before, there's a lot of different things that go into it. We look at the land, the water, people, where they are, their resources, what they do with their resources, different governments, different languages, just a myriad of different things. But right now, this week, we're going to look at land and water, okay? And so today we'll go over land, and then the next one is going to be going over water. So, number one, I'm going to be sending you excerpts from this book. It is a world geography book. You see, mine is written on because I take notes all over my book. But it is for Asia, and we're going to be going through right now and reading about Asia. And then you're going to have some questions to answer. So this is video number 10. All right, so let's go ahead and get out what I've sent you along. It's section 1. It's about 5 pages long, so I don't know if we'll read all of it, but we'll get through most of it. So it says, Asia is a landmass for the record books. It's approximately 47 countries. It's approximately 47 countries tops list and a plethora of categories, some of which were covered already. Russia is easily the largest country, China is the most populous, Mongolia is the most sparsely populated, and then there are other records. For instance, Tokyo, Japan, for instance, is far ahead of Seoul, South Korea as the largest agglomeration of people on the planet. 34 million, that means people in one place. Let's see, where we go. Japan is the richest island in the world with a GDP, or gross domestic product, of nearly $5 trillion in 2008. The worst natural disaster ever recorded occurred in China in 1931, a series of floods that killed 4 million people. The comparison is perhaps unfair, as Asia is nearly 4 times the population of the next largest continent and 50% more land area. So even the most populated nation in the world has vast amounts of land that are not being used, and their people aren't on it. So the whole idea that we as a species is we're running out of room on the planet, not very true. If you look at really satellite pictures of populated places, there's a lot of places that aren't populated but are still, they just haven't been populated, just because sometimes they're very difficult, but it's not impossible. So that being said, it is fascinating that so many lists would be headed by Asian countries, territories, and cities. Geography, Asia is no less diverse. The highest point on Earth's surface is Mount Everest. It's located in the Himalayas on the border between Nepal and China. It towers 29,029 feet. That's like 6 miles above air. That's about as high as your average jet flies. So passenger jet, they're usually cruising altitude about 30,000 feet. That's how high this mountain is. Far above the dizzying heights of other tall mountains in the region. Across the continent, the Dead Sea is the lowest non-oceanic place in the world at 1,380 feet below sea level, straddling the border between Israel and Jordan. Asia contains every kind of topographical feature imaginable. Spectacular mountain ranges soar miles into the stratosphere, rolling hills house rare and unfettered wildlife, flat plains and prairies stretch across a mile of sun-drenched territory, nothing marking their progress. Dry steppes cover countryside, scorching hot and bitterly cold. Deserts alike sport barren bluffs and sand dunes. Fertile deltas teeth with life, dramatic waterfalls plunge hundreds of feet into the brimming rivers below, stunning canyons and gorges rip across the landscapes. It is a dazzling place. Asia in its geography is as beautiful and varied as it is huge population and space. So we see that it's a huge continent and it's very, very diverse. So beginning in the west, the nation of Turkey is flanked by the Pontic Mountains in the north, the Taurus Mountains in the south. These ranges are somewhat low, except that in the east, where Mount Ararat crowns the Armenian highland at nearly 17,000 feet. Mount Ararat. Remember that one? The flood? In between is a broad plateau of a few thousand feet high that stretches across most of the country, whose Asian portion is called Anatolia. As Turkey gives way to Saudi Arabia to the south, the mountains gradually diminish. Israel, located in the Mediterranean, is low-lying, but on the Syria-Jordan border, the land is a few thousand feet high. The Syrian desert occupies much of Syria, western Iraq, Jordan, and the northern portions of Saudi Arabia. Okay, so I'm going to skip down. You will need to read places that I skip because there's information you're going to need to be able to answer questions that you have. So let's skip down where it says, on the same page, let's go where it says prominence. That's in bold. It's right here. Right here. So after that, it says, southeast Turkey is also rugged, but large areas of Iraq are low, such as the capital of Baghdad, just 112 feet above sea level. But the land has historically been important for its support for agriculture in an arid region. Satellite views confirm the land's nature as an island of fertility in in a sea of aridity. It's talking about a place called the Fertile Crescent. In ancient times, the land was called Mesopotamia. You probably recognize that from the Old Testament, which means land between the rivers, a fact owing to the centrality of the Tigris and the Euphrates River. So this area, called Mesopotamia, was between the Tigris and Euphrates, which is mentioned as two of the rivers in which were the boundaries for the original Garden of Eden. That's why many people believe that's where civilization started, and that's why we believe that's where creation was at some point, or was in that area. So let's go down to in the South Desert. So in the South Desert gives way to more desert. The Syrian gradually transitions into the Arabian, which is one of the driest places in the world. So you see it, there's just such vast, and you'll find this with pretty much all the continents, is that it's just, all of them are varied. All of them have deserts, mountains, jungles, forest, everything. And that's what this is basically what it's talking about. Let's go down to right here, mostly made of sand as opposed to rock. This is called one of the deserts. So a desert doesn't have to be just sand. If you go to the Mojave, there's desert and rock. There's desert, but it's sand and rock. Mostly covered with sand as opposed to rock, it covers 250,000 square miles of oil-rich land. So even in a place that seems like it would have nothing, the Lord provided for a means for wealth and income. Oil. Quicksands are scattered throughout the desert. Save for oil workers and prospectors, few human settlement exist here. As a whole, Saudi Arabia's harsh terrain and climate make it one of the least densely populated countries in the world, with most of the population centered along the Red Sea or in its capital, Riyadh. Saudi Arabia's southern border, both with Yemen and Oman, is somewhat undefined, meaning they don't really know where it is. Because few people live in the region to argue over it. Basically, it's desert, and so it's kind of like, yeah, there's a border there, but we don't really know where it is because, quite frankly, nobody lives there. Nobody wants to live there. Let's see. Yemen and Oman echo terrain from Saudi Arabia in that they are both largely desert. Southwest Yemen is home to the Hadramaut region, which is crowned at 12,028 feet by Yemen's highest peak. In eastern Oman, the Al-Hajar Mountains divide the Arabian Desert from the coast. The United Arab Emirates, home to Dubai, and its spectacular skyline is mostly under a few hundred feet high. Iran is a transitional country between West Asia and Central Asia, so it's a very central place. That's why over many years there's been many conflicts there and war and things like that, as people fight over the land, fight over the space. The country has one of the highest mean elevations on Earth, or average elevations, dominated by several impressive mountain ranges and high interior plateaus. We're going to go mobile for a moment because we're moving. Hopefully not going to drop my phone camera, or my phone that has a camera. Move that out of the way. So we are Iran, right here. That's the region. See how it's centrally located between Europe and between Asia. You got to go through here. If you wanted to go India into Europe, you would have to go through here. Otherwise, you've got to go north of the Caspian Sea and through either desert right here or mountains right here, which is rather interesting. And we'll go ahead and get into this right now, is that God designed Asia. It's very interesting. Number one, the people are very, very tribal and warlike. If you look at a lot of the nations, their histories, there's just conquest after conquest after conquest after conquest. But God actually, even though Europe is connected with Asia, he actually separated the two by natural things, natural barriers. Number one is, from up here to here, there's a mountain range, a pretty serious mountain range, and it's called the Ural Mountains. Once you go to here, now we have the Caspian Sea that cuts that off, and then here, there's more desert. So anybody trying to conquer this area has their easiest way is going to be through here. But even that is hindered because of mountains and desert. So even though this may be connected here, God designed Asia to be separate from Europe. Even though Russia has, Russia is seen as having land in both, this is really seen as the natural barrier. And as you go throughout history, there were people who conquered vast land areas, the Mongols, but they didn't often go this way because of how they would have to go over the mountains and then into some pretty harsh territory here. So they would conquer here and down into here. And also something else very interesting too is that if you look on the western side, the eastern side of Asia, it's got a lot of islands off the coast, which makes it actually very difficult to, unless you have a much more advanced navy, it makes it actually difficult to try to conquer this way, because you've got all of these little islands where you've got to conquer people and then be able to have something there to be able to launch that way. If you notice, Japan, these nations never went exploring that way. They conquered to here, and then they tried to conquer this way, but they never went past the past the Pacific. They never went conquering to the Pacific. There were people who explored this way, but they explored down, but they never went any further this way. So, in essence, the Lord created Asia, and he actually hemmed them in so that these people would stay with these people until the right time, until a modern time when things could be different. All right, and you'll actually see you'll see how the Lord actually did that with various nations, how he separated nations to protect things, to see that his plan would move forward. All right, so we said Iran is a transitional country because it takes you from Africa into there or from Europe. It's kind of the most natural way. There was let's see if I can find it. There was a very famous trade route. I think it was the Silk Route or something like that, that went from Europe, went through here, through China and India. And that was the route they took to get things from here to here and coming back before they started sailing around the tip of Africa. Okay, so let's go right here. It says, the Zagros are the longest of the two, picking up from the Turkish border and heading southeast to the Persian Gulf. The Arbos, which run through the capital, Tehran, rim the Caspian Sea and the shorter but higher of the two. So, so we see, and then, let's see, the most central region of the country is known as the Central Plateau, and although it is not technically mountainous, elevations can vary widely. Iran's lower areas near the Persian Gulf in the south. We are going to skip over to page 9. Remember, you do need to do the rest of the reading, but but I'm going to skip over it for sake of time so that you're not listening to a 25 minutes of me reading, which I know, as exciting as that might be, gets a little old. All right, so we're going to start right here, the vast majority. So the vast majority of India ranges between sea level and 2,000 feet in elevation. The western area is occupied by the Thar Desert, and the world's seventh largest one of the more sparsely populated regions of the country. This region is generally below 1,500 feet, stretching toward the Himalayas to the north, then turning southeast to follow the Ganges River. The Indo-Gangetic Plain is home to the capital, New Delhi, as well as the vast majority of India's population, making it likely the most densely populated region in the world. In the center and south of India, the Deccan Plateau forms the land between the western and eastern Ghat mountain ranges, which lie along either coastline. So we're talking about India now. So you've got deserts, mountain ranges, and then in the north, the highest mountain ranges of the world, the Himalayas, and then right there is Nepal. Let's see. Ghat mountain ranges which lie along either coastline. Several large cities exist throughout this region as well, such as Bangalore and Hyderabad. All right, so in India's north are the Himalayan mountains. These rise quickly and steeply from the Indo-Gangetic Plain. So there's a plain here, and then they rise, and then they start going up where the Himalayas are. They are are easily the world's highest mountain system. They are spread across 7 countries: Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, China, Nepal, Bhutan, and Myanmar, although Afghanistan's Hindu Kush is usually considered a separate chain. So these mountains stretch all through here, the Himalayas. See, the highest of the mountain peaks is Mount Everest, the highest peak on Earth, 29,029 feet above sea level. Several others are important both geographically and recreationally. K2, the world's second highest peak at 28,251 feet, is notoriously difficult to climb, having claimed dozens of lives on its sheer slopes. So Everest is the highest, but K2 is considered the hardest to climb. To grasp the dizzying heights of the Himalayas, comparisons come in handy. The highest mountain outside of Asia, the Andes Mountain, Aconcagua, that's somewhere over here. I'm not sure where it is. It's 28,841 feet high, over a mile shy of Everest. In the U.S., I think the highest ones are between 14 to 15,000 feet. So that's like half of what Everest is. See, China is the world's 3rd or 4th largest country. The precise figures are disputed, leaving the ranking of China and the United States in limbo. So some say they're the 3rd, we're 4th. Some say we're 4th and they're 3rd. Not a big deal. By area, and has some of the most diverse geography of any nation. The entire western region is known as the Tibetan Plateau. So China right here, Tibetan Plateau is here. Where elevation slowly recovers from the dramatic heights of the Himalayas. Nearly 1 million square miles large, the average elevation across the plateau is nearly 15,000 feet high, which is higher than the highest mountain peak in the contiguous United States. So this area, the average height is higher than the highest mountains we have. It's pretty high. 2 smaller mountain ranges mark the edge of the Tibetan Plateau across the terrain and gives way to the basins, 2 basins. The Tarim Basin in the northeast is only several thousand feet high, while the Sichuan Basin near the country's geographic center is even lower. Tibetan Plateau is the source of many Chinese rivers, including the Yellow and the Yangtze, both of which flow east through the North China Plain into the East China Sea. And then it goes on to mention some more about, see, if we go here north of China, the Gobi Desert is a cold desert that occupies much of Mongolia and its neighbor Kazakhstan. Are the largest landlocked countries in the world, and both share the Altai Mountains. So now we're talking about Mongolia and Kazakhstan here, these two. Let's see, whose highest point is nearly 15,000 feet. Lake Khalsgul is where Mongolia is one of the largest and most picturesque lakes in the world. North of these countries, so where is that lake? Oh, wow. Can't find it. That's odd. We'll keep going. It says, east of the Ural Mountains, which demarcate the boundary between Europe and Asia, a few geological features exist to differentiate the terrain. Most of the massive plain of Russia is known as Siberia. So this is mostly known as Siberia, and nobody lives there because it's so harsh. In Japan, some other offshore islands, and all of the vast area of Southeast Asia, much of the land is volcanic and is built on the slopes of the mountains rising out of the sea. Japan's Mount Fuji is of particular importance as the highest peak in Japan, while Malaysia and Indonesia have several high summits. Southeast Asia is tremendously fragmented with tens of thousands of islands, many uninhabited. However, some of the large islands have extremely high population densities, means there's a lot of people there. So, again, number one, the geography of Asia, it's very diverse. You've got mountains, plateaus, deserts, all different types of deserts. You got jungles, you've got highest peak in the world, lowest point in the world. It's very, very, very diverse. So when you think of Asia, you can't just think of maybe China or India. It's this whole area here. I mean, it's the largest continent in the world. So definitely think about that. And then also, God's design for Asia. Remember, I talked about earlier the design of how He kept Asia and the people within this area largely to themselves until the correct time that He wanted to bring forth. And He did that by the way He made it. So there's mountains and seas and deserts that kind of hem them in on this side, and then you've got the Pacific Ocean on this side, and then you've got all of these small little islands that are down here that also make it difficult to try to conquer and invade. So again, God's design was to be able to hem them in and keep them there until the proper time at which He wanted the world to know more about them. So that has to do with God's terrain, the land. Next thing we're going to look at is the waterways. So be up for that one.